Good morning. If you would please introduce yourself and spell your name for us.
Good morning. My name is Danielle Weinstein, D-A-N-I-E-L-L-E, W-E-I-N-S-T-E-I-N.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Weinstein. Ms. Weinstein, where are you employed?
I'm employed by the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, or FDLE.
And what is the Florida Department of Law Enforcement? If you could explain what that agency is to the jury.
Sure. It is an agency that helps out with criminal investigations. We have a laboratory and an investigative services.
All right. How long have you been working with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement?
For about 8 years.
All right. What did you do before you started working at the Florida Department of Law Enforcement?
I was just getting my degrees before then.
Okay. What degree did you obtain?
So I went to Cedar Crest College, which was in Allentown, Pennsylvania, where I received my Bachelor of Science in Genetic Engineering with a concentration in Forensic Science, and then I continued to receive my Master of Science in Forensic Science.
Okay, same school?
Yes.
Okay. And after receiving those, did you have any training before starting work with Florida Department of Law Enforcement?
I had training that was given by the Florida Department of Law Enforcement.
All right. And what does that training involve?
So the training through FDLE takes about 1.5 years. In the first part, I'm doing readings of journal articles and textbooks. I'm working on practice samples, and I'm taking written, oral, and practical exams. And then in the second part, I'm working on casework underneath the supervision of a trained analyst. And the entire thing finishes with an oral board, which I successfully completed. And that means that I am certified by FDLE in forensic serology and DNA analysis.
Do you have a particular title?
I'm a crime laboratory analyst in the biology section.
And what are your duties as a crime laboratory analyst, like on a general basis?
So generally, I'm assigned cases by my supervisor, and I may do forensic serology testing, so that's testing for body fluids such as blood, semen, and saliva. And then I may forward samples through the DNA analysis process to develop DNA profiles. I can look at any questioned DNA profiles from the evidence, and I can compare any known DNA profiles from known people in the case. I can write reports, and I can come to court on an as-needed basis.
All right, and so you just mentioned some words. Can you explain to the jury what is forensic serology and DNA analysis?
Sure. So forensic serology is the testing of body fluids such as blood, semen, and saliva. And then forensic DNA analysis is the further testing of those cells or body fluids in order to develop DNA profiles. And these are all done on items of evidence.
And what are DNA profiles? What does that mean?
A DNA profile essentially looks like peaks on a graph. It is representative of being from human DNA. That's essentially what DNA profiles are.
Do you belong to any professional organizations?
No, I do not.
Okay. And is the lab work you do accredited?
Yes, it is.
And is the lab itself accredited?
Yes.
Okay. Approximately how many DNA analysis have you done, do you believe, in your career?
Definitely, I've worked on over 800 cases at this point.
Do you have any continuing educational training as part of your job with FDLE?
Yes, we do. We are required to have 16 hours at least of continuing education per year. This involves reading journal articles to keep up with everything that's going on, and watching webinars, and going to conferences as well.
All right. And do you ever take proficiency tests?
Yes, I do.
What are those?
A proficiency test is a test that, as a DNA analyst, I need to take twice per year. It's essentially a test that's given by an external agency where no one at FDLE knows the answers. I treat it just as if I would, using our normal procedures, working it as if it's evidence. And then I send the results back to the agency, and they grade it on a pass-fail basis.
All right. And have you passed every proficiency test you've been given?
Yes, I have.
And have you ever testified in court as an expert in DNA analysis?
Yes, I have.
Approximately how many times?
About 19 times.
Judge, this time I would tender the witness if they have any questions.
No questions.
Okay. All right, explain, and you kind of started this a little bit when I was talking about DNA. Now, what is DNA? If you can explain what DNA is to the jurors in terms that might, for lay people to understand.
Sure. So DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. It is the building blocks of all living things that make up everything in the world that's alive. DNA in the human body is within every cell, with the exception of mature red blood cells. You're going to get half of your DNA from your mother and half from your father to make you who you are. Greater than 99% of our DNA is the same from person to person, and less than 1% is different. So it's within that less than 1% where people are going to be unique and where I do my testing. There is the caveat of I would not be able to tell identical twins apart. They would appear to have the same DNA profile.
Even that unique 1% would be the same when you're talking about identical twins.
With my testing, yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
And where is DNA? You mentioned on every cell of the body. So where is it found typically?
It is found all over the entire body, every single cell, so in all of the body fluids, in cells in the hands. It's found in the roots of the hair as well.
So like skin cells?
Yes, skin cells as well.
What is the method of DNA testing that you use in your lab?
So we use STR DNA testing.
And what does that mean? What is STR testing?
STR stands for short tandem repeats. These are short repeating areas along the DNA. I look at a total of 21 different STR areas, and that's what makes up the DNA profile. As I had mentioned, getting half your DNA from your mother and half from your father, you're going to have one DNA type from each parent at each of those 21 areas. So a DNA profile will contain 2 DNA types at each area for one person.
All right. And how long has STR testing been used?
That's been used for over 30 years, since the 1990s.
All right. Is it generally accepted in the forensic science community?
Yes, it is.
Now, when did you first become involved in the Jermaine Bass case?
I first received evidence back in the beginning of 2022, I believe. Or 2023.
If you need to look at your report
Sorry, yeah.
to refresh your recollection, you can.
The first submission that I received was 10/19/2022.
Okay, so October 19th of 2022 is when you first received a submission.
Yes.
All right. What item in that submission in October of 2022 were you given to analyze?
I was given 4 different items. There were swabs from a magazine base, swabs from the grip and trigger, and swabs from the slide and sights. These are all from a Glock 42 firearm. And then there were also buccal swabs from Jermaine Bass Jr.
And explain to the jury what buccal swabs are.
So buccal swabs are a known DNA swab that's taken from the inside cheek of a person's mouth. I am given the buccal swabs to use as a known standard for the person, so I'll get a known DNA profile for them.
Okay, so when you get a buccal swab that's identified as being to an individual, you will break down that DNA so that you can form an entire profile to use later to compare to other items. Is that right?
Yes, I can explain our DNA analysis process.
Okay.
If you'd like.
Sure, absolutely.
Sure. So, for the DNA analysis process, I first cut a swab and place it into a tube, and then that goes through the process. There are 4 steps. The first step is called extraction. That's where I'm using chemicals and heat to break open the cells and release the DNA. Then the second step is called quantitation. That's where I'm determining how much DNA, how much human DNA is in each of my samples. And then the third step, that's called amplification. And that's where we use another instrument that is kind of like a photocopier. It's highlighting all of those 21 areas, those STR areas that I want to look at, and it's making millions of copies of them. And then the final step is where I'm detecting that DNA am running it on an instrument that's separating out the DNA, and it's translating that information into a DNA profile, which looks like peaks on a graph.
All right. Now, when you receive these items, which you've described as swabs from the magazine base, swabs from grip/trigger, swabs from slide/sights, and the buckle swabs from Jermaine Bass, are each of these items packaged individually?
Yes, they are.
Is there any chance of contamination between any of the items?
Not as far as I know. When I receive each item, and I'm working each item, I only have one item of evidence open at a time, and I clean my lab bench and all my utensils in between each item of evidence as well.
Okay. And you described what type of instrument did you say you use?
We use a, for which part?
Just for the analysis part. You were saying you use an instrument that you put them in or something?
Sure, we use a lot of different instruments. So we use the instrument that does our quantitation is called a 7500. The instrument that does the amplification step, so making all the copies, that's called a Verity thermal cycler. And then the final step where I was talking about separating out the DNA and translating that information, that's a 3500 genetic analyzer instrument.
All right, and are these instruments inspected and certified on a regular basis?
Yes, they are.
All right. Now, were you able to develop a profile for comparison from the buccal swabs of Jermaine Bass Jr.?
Yes, I was.
All right. Did you then attempt to make a comparison with the other swabs that you received in this initial submission, which was the first submission you received, correct?
Yes, so I obtained a complete DNA profile from the buccal swabs from Jermaine Bass. So that means there was DNA at all of the 21 areas I was looking at. And then I went on to look at the swabs from the magazine base and the other swabs from the grip and trigger and the slide and sights. And I determined
Well, before you, I'll go through each one individually. Why don't we do that to make it a little easier? So, did you compare the known swab or the known DNA of Jermaine Bass Jr. with the swabs from the magazine base of the Glock 42 firearm?
Yes, I did. So prior to my comparison, I will look at the overall DNA profile that I get from the magazine base, and I'll determine a conclusion about it. So what I first determined was that the DNA results I obtained demonstrated the presence of a mixture consistent with 2 donors, including at least 1 male contributor. So then with that mixture, I then compared Jermaine Bass Jr., and he was included as a possible contributor to the mixed DNA profile.
Okay, so he was included, but were you able to make a statistical determination of the likelihood that his DNA was included in that?
So the statistic that I calculated was that the observed mixed DNA profile is greater than 700 billion times more likely to occur if the sample originated from Jermaine Bass Jr. and 1 unrelated individual than from 2 unrelated individuals.
So 700 billion to 1 that he would be one of the included ones, correct? Basically?
No, so the statistic needs to be stated in a very specific way.
Okay.
You know, the observed mixed DNA profile is greater than 700 billion times more likely to occur if it originated from Jermaine Bass Jr. and 1 unrelated individual than from 2 unrelated individuals.
Okay. All right. And 700 billion, how many people are there on this planet?
So there's probably about 7 billion people on the planet. Our statistic, of course, is not related to the people on the planet, but it is easier to think about how 7 times 100 would give you 700 billion people. So it's just kind of a cutoff and a threshold that we use, where the actual statistic is greater than that.
All right. So in that particular swab from the magazine base of the Glock, you had determined that it was that he was likely included as a contributor to the DNA on that particular swab, Jermaine Bass Jr.
Jermaine Bass Jr. was included as a possible contributor, yes.
Okay. What about the slide and sights of the firearm, which was the swabs from the slide sights of the Glock 42 firearm? Were you able to make any determination from that particular swab?
For the swabs from the slide and sites, for that result, I got limited DNA results, so that data was not interpretable. This means in this case that there were DNA types in the profile, but there wasn't enough information for me to really determine, is it one person, is it more than one person? So I decided I can do no further interpretation on this. I can't do any comparisons to it.
Okay. So no comparisons really, or nothing you could say about the slide or sites from that particular swab?
It was not interpretable, no.
Okay. What about the grip and the trigger, the swabs from the grip and the trigger? Now, and when you received these submissions, you're titling them swabs from grip and trigger. Did you actually make the swabs?
I did not take the swabs. The swabs were taken by the agency and then sent to me.
Okay, and so when you write down swabs from grip/trigger, that's what you were being told was the title of the swab, correct?
Yes, that's what they were labeled as.
Okay. And what did you determine from the swab from the grip and trigger?
For the swabs from the grip and trigger, the DNA results obtained demonstrated the presence of a mixture consistent with 2 donors, including at least 1 male contributor. And then I did my comparison, just like in the other sample, where Jermaine Bass Jr. was included as a possible contributor to the mixed DNA profile. And then I continued on to calculate my statistic, which was that the observed mixed DNA profile is greater than 700 billion times more likely to occur if the sample originated from Jermaine Bass Jr. and 1 unrelated individual than from 2 unrelated individuals.
When you finished these so in other words, basically you included Jermaine Bass Jr. on the grip and trigger as well as the magazine base, but you were unable to get anything from the slider sites, correct?
Correct.
All right. Now, when you are finished with your findings, do you submit a report?
Yes, I do.
Okay. When did you submit the report on these particular findings?
This report was submitted on February 13th, 2023.
All right. Now, after submitting this report, did you receive another submission?
Yes, I did.
And what submission what did you receive?
In the next submission, I received buccal swabs from Shirley Bass.
All right. What was the date of that submission?
The date of my laboratory report, that was...
Or the date it was submitted to you?
I'm not sure if I have that number.
If I can, may I approach the witness, Judge?
Do you just want the laboratory report? Oh, I see.
Yeah.
My apologies, yes. The evidence was submitted on May 11th, 2023.
Okay. So on May 11th of 2023, what were you given?
I was given buccal swabs from Shirley Bass.
All right. What did you do with that submission?
So I ran the swab through the DNA analysis process, and I obtained a complete DNA profile from those known buccal swabs.
So you obtained from this buccal swab a complete DNA profile of Shirley Bass?
Correct.
Okay. And what did you do with that profile?
So then I compared the profile to the swabs from the magazine base and the swabs from the grip and trigger, those mixtures that I had before.
And were you able to include Shirley Bass as a possible contributor for either one of those areas?
No, I was not.
Okay. So you did not locate the DNA of Shirley Bass on either the grip or the trigger, as well as or the base of the magazine.
Objection, that's misleading, Judge. Ask the question again.
You were not able to determine or find DNA belonging to Shirley Bass to include her on either one of those submissions.
Specifically for the swabs from the magazine base, when I compared the DNA profile from Shirley Bass to that mixture, there was not enough support for inclusion or exclusion. So no determination could be made to that item. So essentially there were some DNA types of hers present, but the calculation was very low. It gave a very low statistic, which is not very descriptive. It cannot tell me whether or not her DNA may or may not be present in the sample, so I cannot include or exclude her. And then as far as the swabs from the grip and trigger, Shirley Bass was excluded as a contributor, so her DNA types were not present in that mixed DNA profile.
Okay. So she was specifically excluded from the grip and trigger, correct?
That is correct.
All right. And when was this report completed?
This report was completed July 18th, 2023.
Did you, after receiving, or after completing this report and submitting it, did you receive another submission on this case?
Yes, I did.
And when did you receive that submission?
I received this, or my lab received it on July 27th, 2023.
And what was that submission?
I received a blood stain card that was represented as being from Jayla Bass.
All right. And were you able to obtain a DNA profile from that submission of Jayla Bass?
Yes, I obtained a complete DNA profile.
All right. And what did you do with that complete DNA profile that you obtained of Jayla Bass?
So I then compared it to those previous mixtures that I had from the evidence.
All right. And what were your results?
For the magazine base, Jayla Bass, or yes, Jayla was included as a possible contributor to the mixed DNA profile, and the statistic I calculated to that was that the observed mixed DNA profile is approximately 25,000 times more likely to occur if the sample originated from Jayla Bass and one unrelated individual than from two unrelated individuals.
Okay, so 25,000 versus 700 billion, that's a big difference in the statistical probability, correct?
Yeah, so it's still an inclusion, it's still a higher statistic, but it's not quite to the level of greater than 700 billion.
Okay. What about the grip and trigger? Were you able to obtain, or were you able to make a comparison in that particular case?
Yeah, so for the swabs from the grip and trigger, Jayla Bass was excluded as a contributor to the mixed DNA profile.
So her DNA was, you were not able to find her DNA at all on the grip or trigger?
Her DNA types were not present.
Okay. And when was this report done?
This report was completed September 13th, 2023.
Did you at any time receive another submission from on this case?
Yes, I did.
And when was that submission received?
This one was received October 26th, 2023.
All right, and what did you receive in that submission?
I received buccal swabs from Jermaine Bass, which I was told was the son.
Okay. Were you able to develop a profile from that submission?
Yes, I developed a complete DNA profile from those buccal swabs.
And were you able to make any comparisons with that known profile?
Yes, I did. I compared it to those previous mixtures.
And what did you find?
For the swabs from the magazine base, Jermaine Bass was included as a possible contributor to the mixed DNA profile. And the statistic I calculated was that the observed mixed DNA profile is greater than 700 billion times more likely to occur if the sample originated from Jermaine Bass and one unrelated individual than from two unrelated individuals.
Yeah. Go ahead, finish.
And then also compared to the swabs from the grip and trigger, for that one, Jermaine Bass was also included as a possible contributor to the mixed DNA profile. The statistic sounds the same. The observed mixed DNA profile is greater than 700 billion times more likely to occur if the sample originated from Jermaine Bass and one unrelated individual than from two unrelated individuals.
So in this particular case, and I'm going to go through, so you have on the grip and trigger two potential contributors, and you've now identified both the father and the son as potential or possible inclusion in those two as the two donors, correct?
for the grip and trigger, I have included both the father and son, yes.
Right. And on the base of the magazine, you indicated 2 donors, but in this particular case, you've indicated now to the jury that there was the father, the son, and potentially the daughter as well. So that's 3 donors, correct?
Yes, that is correct,
This-
which doesn't totally make sense for a mixture of 2 donors to have 3 people included to it. But the reasoning for this is because they're all related biologically. So I did go back and do further figuring out who may be actually included.
And what did you determine? Explain that to the jury, what you determined.
Sure. So I had written another report, actually, that was just about doing more statistics to try to figure out who may be included. So I was able to compare combinations of 2 people. So again, like the reason for all 3 appearing to be included is because they're all related, they're all sharing DNA, right? A father is going to give half their DNA to the children. So it can look like somebody, when compared individually, is present because their DNA types are present. But in comparing them in combinations of 2 instead, I'm able to figure out who may be in the profile. So essentially, I did combinations of comparing both Jermaine Bass Jr. and Jayla Bass, and comparison of comparing Jermaine Bass the son and Jayla Bass. And for both of those, when looking at the profiles taken together, and I also calculated statistics to it as well, both of them were not possible to occur together. So the father-daughter together and the 2 siblings together could not occur together. So when compared together, they were excluded. And then so basically what I was trying to determine is what's the best explanation for this data. So this mixture is best explained if the father, Jermaine Bass Jr., and the son, Jermaine Bass, are included together. So that statistic that I calculated to that inclusion is that the observed mixed DNA profile is greater than 700 billion times more likely to occur if the sample originated from Jermaine Bass Jr. and Jermaine Bass than if it originated from 2 unrelated individuals.
All right. So basically, by doing those combinations, it excludes Jayla Bass as being a contributor to this mixture.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. Now, did you do a test to determine what type of DNA? Meaning, was it touch DNA? Was it from saliva? Was it from blood? Were you able to did you do any of that type of determination with these swabs?
I did not. I'm not able to know what the DNA came from.
Okay. And so we talk about touch DNA. Explain to the jury what touch DNA is.
Sure. So touch DNA is just DNA that comes from the hands, from handling or touching an object or a person.
All right. And would, like, say, perspiration, say you were sweating, could that transfer or go onto a gun? Or go onto any object, basically?
Yes. So touch DNA transfers at any time you're touching an item. So in general, it's going to vary throughout the day, even from with one person. If somebody has recently washed their hands, they're obviously going to have less DNA on their hands. If somebody, say, has recently coughed into their hand, they maybe have some saliva in their hand, and body fluids are going to contain more DNA than just cells from the hand. So they could have more DNA in that case to transfer to an item. Yeah, those are different ways.
How long does it take to touch something and leave DNA?
It really only takes a brief touch, but it just will also depend on whether I can detect it, how like swabs are collected, for instance.
Okay. But it doesn't take much time. In other words, if I were to grab this right here or push that or something, I could leave touch DNA on that particular location.
Yes, you could.
Did you eventually receive a final submission in this case?
Yes, I did.
All right. And do you recall when that submission was?
It was submitted to me on March 7th, 2024.
Okay, and what was that submission in March 7th of 2024?
So this was swabs from a Mandalorian comforter from area number 6 on the comforter.
All right, what did you do with that swab?
So that swab did have red-brown staining on it. So I used a color change test, which gave chemical indications for the presence of blood. And then I continued to send the swab through the DNA analysis process. And I obtained a complete DNA profile consistent with a male individual.
All right, and did you compare that profile with the known profiles you already had done in this case?
Yes, I did.
And were you able to make a match in this particular case?
Yes, for this complete DNA profile from the Mandalorian comforter, this DNA profile matches the DNA profile from Jermaine Bass, so that's the son. And the statistic that I calculated was that the observed DNA profile is greater than 700 billion times more likely to occur if a sample originated from Jermaine Bass than if it originated from an unrelated individual.
And was the son, Jermaine Bass, the sole contributor in this? Was there any, or were there any other donors that you located?
It was just a single source, meaning it came from one person. So Jermaine Bass was the one who matched to it.
All right. Did you receive any other submissions after that submission?
No, I did not.
All right. And did that basically conclude your work on this case as far as what you did in your lab analysis?
Yes, it did.
Judge, if I could have one moment.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Your Honor, I will pass the witness.
All right. Chris?
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Now, you are aware in this case some of the alleged facts, correct?
Yes, I'm given a case summary on the front end when I get every case that comes from the agency.
And that's typical.
Yes.
And you were very careful in terms of the son and the father having the same name.
Yes.
And Jermaine Bass Jr., the swab you got before the other one, would be the father.
Yes, that's correct.
And then the son was just Jermaine Bass.
Yes, that's how the swabs were labeled when they came to me.
Okay. Now, it would not be at all unusual for there to be DNA of Jermaine Bass Jr., Mr. Bass, on his own firearm, correct?
Yes, I would expect that to be the case.
And a lot of times when you have mixtures, not necessarily even the mixtures in this case, there's typically an expected donor that you say, I expect this person to be here, and here's other people in the mix.
In certain cases, we will have an expected donor. It just depends on the facts of the case that I'm given.
Mm-hmm. But you are confident that you didn't mess anything up. You have the two Jermaine Basses separate for your results.
Yes, I'm confident. I did speak with the agency to verify that I had the correct DNA swabs because I was concerned about the names being the same.
Okay. And I looked at your reports, and then I looked at the dates you received your submissions, and I saw pretty much a 3 to 4 month turnaround. Does that sound about right?
Yes.
Okay. So you receive the items into FDLE, but they go into an intake first, do they not?
Yes, they do. They go into our secure evidence vault.
They will eventually make their way to you. You work on the item. You furnish your report.
Yes.
And in this situation, we have from submission of items to FDLE before they even get to you, you doing your work, submitting your report, about approximately 3 to 4 months.
Yes, I mean, I don't remember specific timing.
You have your reports in front of you if you need to look at them to verify. Would you like to look at them too?
Sure.
And the one that you did the more detailed statistics on, that took a little longer.
Yes, but that was also separate. There wasn't anything submitted at that time.
There you go. All right. Now, did you need to look just to verify that we're talking about 3 to 4 months from submission to reports?
Yes, about, and that is typical. You know, I'm working 20 to 30 cases every single month, so.
All right. And FDLE has policies of limits, correct?
What type of?
Like limits of submission of evidence, I apologize.
Oh, yes, we have an evidence submission policy that agencies must follow with respect to submitting items of evidence.
Okay. And those limits are based per submission.
Yes.
So an agency can submit up to the limit for one submission. They then could do a second submission up to that limit, a third submission up to that limit.
Yes, that's correct.
There's also ways to get exceptions, just to get approval.
Yes, there are.
Okay, and is that as easy as a phone call or an email to get the approval to receive, your agency to receive additional items?
Yes, it would be a phone call to the supervisor of the biology section. One of the supervisors will have to give permission to send more items in.
Okay. Mr. Terry spoke with you a little just now. Based on what Mr. Terry talked with you about, I determined what you said was 4 known profiles you received
Yes.
throughout this whole case. And you received sets of 4 swabs, sets magazine, grip and trigger, slide and sight, and comforter.
Yes, that is correct.
All right. Now, you cannot testify here today or tell this jury that Shirley Bass did not touch that firearm.
As far as the DNA results that I obtained and what I compared to with Shirley Bass, there was no determination as far as her contribution of DNA to the magazine base. And then for the grip and trigger, she was excluded as a contributor.
Okay, now I know those are your results. What I'm asking you is because somebody has been excluded from DNA, either from a single source profile or a mixture, that does not mean they didn't touch the item.
It doesn't necessarily mean they've never touched the item. I can only report what my DNA results show at this specific time. I can't tell you what may have occurred at any given time, prior or after, of course. And I cannot tell you how DNA gets there or when it gets there.
So you're not telling this jury Shirley Bass never touched that firearm that night. You can't. And that's not your job to do that.
Correct.
Okay. When you were looking at the swabs you received, the swabs from the magazine base, the grip trigger, or the slide, you did not note any red staining, correct?
Correct. I noted that there's a light grayish staining on these swabs.
Which swab is that?
On all of those swabs, from the magazine base, the grip trigger, and the slide and sights.
Because it was not a red substance, was there any need to go any further and do maybe a phenolphthalein test?
So the phenolphthalein test is our test for blood, and no, I did not use it in this case with those 3 swabs.
Did you in fact use it on the Mandalorian comforter swab?
Yes, I did, because those swabs were a red-brown color, which is typically consistent with what we see with possible blood.
And when I asked you just a little bit ago that you cannot tell this jury that Shirley Bass did not touch that firearm that evening, the same applies to Jayla Bass, correct? Well, I know what your results are. Right, go ahead and look at them.
Right. Right, so she was initially included, and then I did my further comparisons where she was excluded from the magazine base, and then from the mixture of the grip and trigger, she was also excluded as a contributor.
After she had been included in the swabs from the magazine.
Yes.
Now, those are your results, and as you said, basically, you get your items, you get your swabs, you have your known profiles. All you can tell us is what those swabs are telling you at that time.
Yes, I just do my individual comparisons when I get the swabs.
Right. So you can't sit here and tell this jury that Jayla Bass didn't touch that firearm that evening.
I don't have any knowledge of any activities that occur. I can only tell you what my DNA results show.
All right, let's put aside the Mandalorian Comforter. That is a single source profile, and that matches Jermaine Bass, the son, and that is item 15.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I'm going to kind of put those aside and concentrate on the other two. And then you've already talked with Mr. Terry about the slide on the site. You could not make any determination for anybody on that.
I'm sorry, for what?
For any of the known profiles on the slide or site, which is going to be item 9.
So yes, so for the slide and sites, it was a limited DNA profile. There wasn't enough information in the profile for me to do any further comparisons to it, so it just stopped there.
Okay. So I'm going to concentrate on item 7, the swabs from the magazine, and item 8, and discuss those in a little bit more detail. Now, item 7, the swabs from the magazine base, you have told Mr. Terry that that was a mixture consistent with 2 contributors,
Yes, that is correct.
and you included both Jermaine Bass, the son, and Jermaine Bass Jr., the father.
Yes, I did.
They were both included with the statistic calculated being 700 billion.
It was greater than 700 billion.
And in fact, 700 billion, isn't that your cap or your cutoff at FDLA?
Yes, that's our cutoff point. It's just used because it's an easier number to think about.
So you could have somebody included in a mixture and it's even more than 700 billion, but you're going to cut it off at that 700 billion.
Well, we are saying it is greater than 700 billion, and I do have the actual statistical numbers in my case file.
Right. And I want to talk to you a little bit about that on the grip and trigger. I'm going to go through that. All right. So now, did you use Star Mix with item 7?
Yes, I did.
Please tell the jury what Star Mix is.
So StarMix is our computer software program. It's essentially a calculator. It helps me separate out the contributors to a mixture, so the people that are in a mixture, and then it also helps me calculate my statistics.
Back to item 7, you then make a determination after having a mixture consistent with 2. You have identified both male Basses. Now you end up getting a buckle for Jayla Bass, and she's included as well with a statistic of 25,000.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. And Mr. Terry had said to you originally you didn't find Shirley's DNA, but you actually couldn't include her, nor could you exclude her.
That is correct. It was too low of a statistic for me to make any determination whether she could be included or excluded.
So she certainly then cannot be excluded, correct?
She cannot be either included or excluded.
Now, not being able to make any determination as to Shirley Bass could be from a combo that the information is limited and the fact the parties were related, correct?
Correct. So for that profile, there was a little bit of information missing out of it. It was more low level, a little bit less DNA that was in it, as well as because the mother, of course, would be related to the children with half of her DNA being given to the children. Of course, that would also impact the comparison. It may look like some of her DNA types are in the profile, even if maybe they wouldn't be normally.
Okay. Now, before you did the additional statistics, and you did that at the request of Mr. Terry.
Correct, I did speak with him.
Okay. And this is again we're talking just about item 7, where now you have a third contributor, correct?
I have two donors to that mixture, where 3 people have been included to it.
Okay. Now, before you did the additional statistics for Mr. Terry, did you discuss this mixture of 2 contributors with your supervisors?
Yes, I did. I discussed with my supervisor and also our technical leader about how to go about using StarMix and using comparisons, obviously like my physical comparison as well, in order to determine who the two donors may be in the mixture.
Now, in StarMix, you would have run that sample as a two-person mixture, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. You could have run it as a three-person mixture, correct?
If there was any indication that there were 3 people in the mixture, then I would have run it as 3 people in StarMix.
And in fact, in your notes, and if you need to refer back to them to refresh your memory, you specifically discuss this with your supervisors. Feel
I
free.
don't recall.
Page, oh sure. We're looking at your report and your correspondence. Refresh your memory as to your conversations with your supervisor.
Yes, it would.
Okay. Go ahead and look at page 3 of the correspondence and see if that refreshes your memory.
Yes, I did speak with both my supervisor and the technical leader.
And you had indicated after speaking with them, you noted that, well, does that refresh your memory, first of all?
Yes, it does.
All right. And you put, I was thinking I want to keep my original conclusion that it's a mixture of 2 and just report the inclusion of the son. Although with the information that they're all related, that could mean it should have been 3. Even without indications of 3, what do you think? And you're talking with your supervisor.
Correct.
You're also advising her that you had called it and run it as a mixture of 2.
Yes.
All right. And after you spoke with your supervisor, a decision was made not to run it in StarMix as a 3-person mixture.
Yes, I decided that my original decision and conclusion that it was a mixture of 2 donors was accurate, even despite there being 3 people seeming to be included into the mixture.
And there is the capability in StarMix to change the scenarios for the program. In other words, run it as a 3-person mixture.
I could have run it as a 3-person mixture, but I did not choose to do that in this case because it was consistent with a 2-person mixture.
You could have, but you didn't, right?
Correct. It was not necessary in this case because my original conclusion of it being 2 donors was accurate.
Looks like you did have a little bit of question about it as we just reviewed and talked with your supervisor, though.
Of course,
All
if
right.
3 people are included into a 2-person mixture, it's going to cause a little confusion. And I'm going to go back and look at that original mixture and verify that my initial thought of it being 2 donors does still make sense.
Now, I wanted to ask you, when you gave Mr. Thierry the statistics in this case, and that's like the 1 in 700 billion, and it said unrelated individuals, correct?
Well, that is how our statistics are set up, yes.
Right. Now, is there any way to develop a statistical analysis for related people?
Well, StarMix does have that capability, however, we have not validated that at our laboratory.
So it does exist. There is a way to develop statistical analysis from related people, but your FDLE office does not do it.
Correct. The reasoning we have chosen to validate StarMix and use it in this specific way and not use it in comparisons to related people is because it uses census data, and after we would validate it, the census data would already be out of date, so it would actually be a less accurate calculation. It wouldn't be as accurate a calculation or as accurate a likelihood ratio, which is our statistic.
So FDLE does not have the StarMix program validated to take related individuals into account.
I am able to, of course, take related individuals into account. I know that people are related in this case. but that has no bearing on the statistical calculation and how it's calculated. It's going to be calculated the same way every time.
Well, all I asked you about was star mix, right? So star mix is not validated at FDLE to take related individuals into account, correct?
Correct.
All right. This is a little bit different of a case than you usually have, right? Because of the related people?
Yes, it made it a little bit more complicated.
Okay. And in fact, you called it previously, it's a rare kind of case.
Yes, I would say that.
All right. All right. In terms of, and we are still on item 7, swabs from magazine base, where you have included both Jermaine Bass's. I wanted to ask you what the actual statistic you have, and you said you had it in your notes. If it will refresh your memory, please look at it. For the son, Jermaine Bass, what is the actual statistic for item number 7, swabs from magazine base?
Sure. So for the son, the swabs from the magazine base. He was included to 310 trillion.
Now, I'm not very good at math. Is 310 trillion more than 700 billion?
Yes, it is, which is why we state our statistic as greater than 700 billion.
Okay, your kind of cap that you put in
Yes.
on FDLE. Okay. All right. Now, item 8 then, finally, again, that's the swab from the grip and trigger, correct?
Yes.
It's going to kind of be a little bit consistent with the fact that it's a mixture consistent with 2 donors, according to you, and you have included both Jermaine Bass's, the son and Jermaine Bass Jr.
Yes, both were included as possible contributors.
And the statistical analysis for both of the Bass males is that greater than 700 billion.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Now, specifically on item 8, though, you were able to exclude Shirley Bass, correct?
Yes, I was.
Okay. That is different from item number 7, where you couldn't include or exclude her.
That is correct, and that's because the swabs from the magazine base, that mixture had a little bit less information in it, whereas for the swabs from the grip and trigger, there was a lot more information, nearly complete information at all of the 21 areas.
And for item 8, Shirley being excluded, that does not mean she did not touch that item, correct?
I cannot determine what activities may have occurred.
Yeah. Same thing with Jayla Bass. She is excluded, correct, from item 8?
Correct.
Okay. You cannot say she did not touch that firearm, correct?
I cannot tell you what activities may have occurred, only what my DNA results show.
Exactly. You can only testify to the DNA results that were found.
That is correct.
Now, in terms of the son, Jermaine Bass, could you give us the statistical analysis now for the grip and trigger, item 8?
Sure, so the number calculated for item 8 was he was included to 640 quintillion.
How many zeros are in quintillion?
So 1 quintillion has 20 zeros.
20 zeros?
Yes.
Right. So it is way above the cap that FDLE uses, greater than 700 billion.
Yes, it is.
Okay. May I have a moment, Your Honor?
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Weinstein. Did I say it right?
Weinstein.
Weinstein. Thank you.
Anything else from the state?
No, Your Honor.